Good evening, everybody. Happy and warm welcome to all of you. So, some of you, I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces. It's great to see all of you attend AuroYouth sessions regularly, and a lot of new joinees as well. Thank you so much for being with us in this beautiful learning journey. And today we have the part 4 of From the Twilight to Light, the Sunlit Path series of interactions. And today's session is going to be on career, by chance or by choice. So we have with us Manoj Pavitran to help us gain little insight into this topic. So just let me introduce the speaker to all of you. Manoj Pavitran grew up in Kerala and graduated as a production engineer in 1988. However, a deep quest led him to Sri Aurobindo and the mother, and he started following the path of integral yoga from 1989. He did his postgraduate studies in product design from the National Institute of Design, NIT, Ahmedabad, in 1993. After a short period of working as a professional design consultant, he quit the profession and joined Auroville in 1995 to explore integral yoga and collective evolution. In Auroville, he is actively involved in higher education, software development, and filmmaking. He also facilitates two transformational programs for the youth: Swadharma, a 5-week residential program for the youth to discover who they are at an individual level, and also he guides them in building a socially just, environmentally sustainable, and consciously awakened future. The second program is Swadhyaya, 8-week online course to explore oneself in the light of the works of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, also orients one to the practice of integral yoga. It is quite a coincidence that I also in my past have made a career shift and I'm completely aligned with the topic for the day and feels really wonderful to be a part of the session. We're really happy to have you with us, Manoj. So in this session, we will discover the answers to some of the fundamental questions. How should I go about choosing my career path so that I can align my inner passion and my outer profession? How can I evaluate my career decisions based on the expectations of my loved ones and society, culture, etc.? What do I do to consider? What should I consider when I choose my career path? And for example, is it money? Is it fame, passion, power, etc.? How can I be happy and successful at whatever I do? So I'd like to share few guidelines before we begin the session. I request all the participants to keep yourselves muted throughout the session, and you can type out your questions in the chat box at any time during the session, and we will try to address these questions towards the end. And we will be sharing a feedback link also towards the end, so please fill it up before you leave. And without wasting much time, I think I'd like to hand over the session to Manoj.
Thank you, Harshita. Thank you, AuroYouth team, for organizing this session. I would like to share a few of my personal insights. Particularly today, when I was focusing on these two words, career by chance or choice, what emerged for me was the third option or third stage, career by grace. And then I saw that it is actually 3 stages of development. First is career by chance. Second is career by choice. Third is career by grace. So I would like to touch these 3 stages. And I hope with that try to shed some light on this whole process where all these questions regarding our career path can be understood. So first is career by chance. Now, the age between 18 to 30, centered around 21. That's the time this whole process of individualization intensifies. And two fundamental questions become very, very important. One is career path, other is relationship. Where you are parting off the ways to become a fully individualized individual. So far, you had been part of a stream, family stream, social stream. But around 21, this process deepens. And these days, what is called the quarter life crisis, where I personally experienced it. I went through that kind of a crisis, where we slowly wake up. I was doing engineering, and I realized that I spent 5 years only to realize that I ended up in a place where I did not want to go. And then you spend so much time, how do you course correct? But in order to course correct, you should know where to go. And when I looked at myself, I did not know what to do with my life. So that's when I took a gap year. At that time, this term was not there. Gap year term was not there. I took 1 year off to figure things out. It's like fish out of water. Now you're thirsty to figure things out. So till that point of time, everything was happening by chance. And here, the underlying reality is that we are pretty much unconscious. Life is just happening, being part of a stream, just another brick in the wall. Though when we follow the fashion trends and do things like everybody else, we think that we are making conscious choice, but it is not. It is just being part of the mass movement. And then that process of chance, the unconscious random floating, where if one is not ready, we may continue in the stream, end up by chance, some or other career, to wake up later in midlife crisis. That's what happened to a large number of people who don't wake up at quarter life crisis. You have the next chance, midlife crisis, when children are grown up and your main project in life is over. And yeah, that's another deeper crisis. So you're lucky when you are hit in your 20s and when you have these deep questions. What's the purpose of my life? Why am I doing what am I doing? That question, why, if that is not arising, then we have a problem. Not only about one's own life, but about society, what's going on in the society. If we don't have the big picture. So one thing that I realized when I was under the crisis was that I did not have a picture, or rather I had some picture that was largely given by the idealism of communism. I'm from Kerala. So when you grow up in Kerala at that time in particular, you have an inclination towards communism. So there was this ideal of communism, though one had no clue what that was, but you have some sense of equality, fraternity, those ideals. Then of course, I was a fan of science and technology. But what happened was, for me, both science and technology as well as communism started falling apart. So the worldview fell apart. That ideal that I held fell apart when I came to know that Russia is falling apart. That ideal is not working. And then I came across the realization that science is hitting upon its boundaries and it has no clue where things are heading. And it has no answer to the question, who am I? What is the purpose of life? And I had no clue about myself. So that's when this question, the fire awakens. From living by chance, the transition happens to living by choice. But to make a choice, you need to know where things are heading. So what's the big picture? And that quest is what led me to read Jiddu Krishnamurti, Bridge of Capra, The Turning Point, The Tao of Physics. Then I came across Swami Vivekananda. He just blew me up. And then I came across Sri Aurobindo. That's when I felt I found an ocean. Gave me a vision of what's happening in the world, the evolutionary crisis in which humanity was heading, and the transformation that is happening on Earth, and being part of that big picture. It made perfect sense. In Kerala at that time, already we had green movements taking place because of the Silent Valley protest and things like that. So I was connected with those movements, and there was this growing awareness about ecological crisis. It was from that context when I was studying industrial development. As a production engineer, I realized that I am being part of a system that is destroying the planet. Now, I can sell my time and creativity to a system that is destroying the planet, or I find an alternative. That's when the choice begins to take place. And that's when you begins to question things and decide your path based on a vision, based on a dream, based on an ideal that you have consciously found worthy of following. So till that point, when we are living this career by chance, it is largely centered around ourselves, my happiness, my little life, my family, my little circle. My circle of empathy, my circle of love is very, very small. But as we expand, as we follow this question of what is the purpose of life itself? What is the purpose of social development? That's when the big picture begins to show up. Without that purpose, we cannot make a choice, because purpose is what gives that reference. In order to make choice, we need a reference. Reference is given by purpose. Once you can find a purpose that is inspiring, the rest automatically follows. Purpose is the reference. Purpose illumines the path. So from the purpose comes the path, from there comes the practice. So these are the three things that unfolds. Purpose, path, practice. Then you have a reference to make decisions, to make choice. So we move from personal concerns to global concerns. If we don't have larger concerns, for example, in the last century, first 50 years, for the whole of India, there was only one purpose: freedom of this country. That was the topmost priority for everyone. So the whole nation was getting aligned. That is the Yuga Dharma of that time. So it is in that Yuga Dharma, our Swadharma come into the picture. What can I do in that context? So the alignment of Yuga Dharma and Swadharma is where the alignment happens. Our place in the society. But that depends upon every Yuga has its own Dharma. Now we are in another context globally. There is a COVID crisis. Then there is an economic crisis. Behind it, there is an ecological crisis. And behind it, there is a psychological crisis. That is a larger context. In which today, if we have a Swadharma for an individual to make a career choice, we need to know the context. It is in this context we are making choice. Where the world is heading. Without that sense, how can we make a choice? To make things worse, say 500 years ago, a farmer's son will become a farmer. His son will become another farmer. It was by birth. World was not changing much. But today, world is changing so fast. It is impossible to know what kind of life will be there, say 25 years down the line. 25 years ago, there was no Google, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was no Instagram. Imagine 25 years ago, someone trying to make a career path without knowing the future that we are in today. Now when you're making life choice for, say, even 5 years down the line, it's unpredictable because the rate of change of the world is so fast. Careers that were relevant in the past has no more value in the future. Everything is falling apart. The situation is worse than what it used to be before. Past was quite stable, but now our future is so completely uncertain. Making a career choice the way it was happening in the past has no meaning. Think of artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, biotech, all that are coming together, making the very thinking process obsolete. So what kind of jobs or work career path we will be suitable for in the future, in 5 years or 10 years down the line? Unpredictable. So one of the crucial things to sense if we are to head towards the future is to know what are the fundamental skill sets we need to face the future. Not a particular domain of the career, but primary skills, the most fundamental skills required to deal with a future that is unpredictable, chaotic, rapidly changing. The first thing is our ability to learn and adapt to a continuously changing scenario. Ability to learn. This is the most fundamental skill necessary to survive in the future. Without it, everything will fall apart. No matter what domain you're going to choose, it will become obsolete within few years. So we need to rapidly upgrade ourselves. Our mobile phones are evolving faster than us. Can we evolve? So we have to root the choice has to come to this space where what is the evolutionary force in me? How can I adapt and grow continuously? Unending education. If you look at Auroville, ideals, the charter, mother has put down this line, a place of unending education, a youth that never ages. It was in 68. Now today, it is, UNESCO has taken that up, the lifelong learning, because that has become fundamental necessity, a fundamental skill to survive and manage and thrive in the future. It's no more domain specific. If you look at 21st century skills as identified by the World Economic Forum, there are 4 skills that are identified: communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. It's not domain specific. It's not a domain knowledge that is relevant and important for the future, but fundamental skills. But even that, I would say, is insufficient. So something like intuition will be far more important in a world that will be run by artificial intelligence. What will make human beings different from the machines? How can we prepare ourselves for that future? How do we make decisions when machines are doing much better job in thinking? Rational intelligence can be handed over to the machines. Then what are we? What is our role? How can we thrive in a future where the power of thought is handed over? Just like the power of walking is given to the cars and automobiles, and the power of thought is handed over to the machines. What are we as human beings? We are facing an evolutionary crisis as a species. And one of the key faculty to develop for the future is intuition, and intuition in the heart, a different way of knowing. Without this, the way to deal with the future will be totally chaotic, because we will be moving from crisis to crisis, and we will not have time to think through, analyze, and arrive at decisions. So how do we move towards that? And this is where the third stage, the career by grace, come into the picture. No matter what choice we make by our rational intelligence, by developing our own will and making choice, this is the direction to go, it will still be wiped out. So what is the necessary faculty to navigate through the emerging chaos? What faculty will give us the pathway? What faculty will show us the purpose? This is where the secret in the heart, the inner knower, come into the picture. Unfortunately, our education system doesn't deal with this. There is something in us that knows truth. That is the reason why when we tell a lie detector can find it in the body. Even the very body knows truth. It is something very physical. So one of the fundamental skills to develop is to know that part within us that knows truth, and to sincerely adhere to that truth. And that is even our body knows. It is our mind with all its thinking, analysis, which disables us from knowing that truth. So when we look at integral education as the way Mother has explained, in terms of development, when the mental development, one of the stages of the mental development is bringing whole silence into the mind so that we can tune into the higher faculty that is within us. Because that will guide us how to take steps. And another important thing to remember is we are not making lifetime career choice. It is the era of agile development, fail fast method. That is, we are rapidly prototyping, rapidly testing things out. Suppose you started imagining that you want to be a dancer and not a doctor. And you may be thinking that it is your parents that are stopping you from becoming a dancer. But as the ancient wisdom says, if you want, those who want to sing will always find a song. Similarly, if dance is meant to you, you will always find a reason to dance. You will always find a song to dance. You will always find an occasion to dance. If you are not doing it, it is just a fantasy in the head. We need to observe what we are doing with the body, not what is going on as dreams in the mind. What is happening at the doing level? If something is propelling you towards action, that is opening a path for you. So what is propelling you towards action? This is where we need to follow the trail of inspiration. What inspires me? To find that little sparks of inspiration, if we are able to follow that, then we can find that little fire, little energy that animates the body. Unless the body is animated and come into action, it is just a fantasy in the mind. So this is something absolutely important to discern, the fantasy that is going on in the mind versus what your body is actually doing, what you are capable of doing. And even in that growth, simple way of finding your path is just like a child, a newborn child learning to walk, starting with crawling. No matter how many times the child is falling, it knows that's what I want to do. See, all these big people are walking and I want to walk. And it does it with the body, step by step, by imitating. The same thing, if the child wants to talk, it simply imitates. Imitation of the whole being with the body. Even when the child speaks, it uses the body, the gesture. It is the embodied way of knowing and doing coming together that makes things happen. One of the problems with the modern education is that it expands the mind and imagination or thoughts, ideas, and we are living inside a social media that fills up the mind with ideas, but very little happening at the body level. An inability to translate an idea into action through the body. This is the gap in our modern imbalanced development. So if you are looking for a path towards the future, you need to translate into things into the bodily level. What is happening at the level of action through your body? Are you doing? So purpose, path, practice. What is your daily practice? Do you have a practice that is actually taking you step by step? Or are you simply sitting and fantasizing and blaming other people? That it is society, it is parents. This is to fool ourselves. If we truly want to walk a path, then we have to start walking. And walking is step by step in action. It is in the body. And body has a way of knowing that is far more fundamental than mental way of knowing. Body knows truth. When you are in your elements, you will feel it in your nerves. You feel it in your cells. When you feel it in your body, you know that you are doing the right thing. The moment you're off, your body becomes dull, heavy, lethargic. The moment you are on the path, you're energized, inspired. But think in terms of small steps, not lifetime career. What inspires me now? And what is it, that one action that I can do now? What is that one glory I can celebrate now? It is through that the path opens up. If we start thinking, we will not find the way, because thinking is over. Thinking is what is stopping us. Mother said about Auroville, leap before you think. Leap of faith. There is something in you that knows truth, and there is something in you that is the faith in possibility in front of you. If you are inspired by something, then you can give yourself. That's the point. When you give yourself, that's the point when the... Here I have rain happening, thunder happening, and that makes my power supply a little erratic. So the path of grace opens when we give ourselves. It's not about what do I get. The way to enter the future is to think in terms of what can I give to the world? What is my possibility at this moment. What can I give, however small it is? The moment we are able to get out of that self-centered perception about the career, what do I want? Turn it around. What does the world need? What does the people around me need? What is the need of the hour? And wanting to it, a living response. And that is the offering. That little wholehearted offering opens the door for the grace to enter. And through that, step by step, path opens up. And you will discover that you are doing things that you never, ever imagined. That is a sign that you have entered a path, a space that is space of grace. And through that, vision comes to you. What is required ahead of time? What is required in any given context, in any given moment? And through that, you will discover yourself, you will create yourself. There's a whole new you that will be formed. But if you think in terms of what to become, whether it is an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, or an entrepreneur, or whatever it is, we are still thinking in terms of 18th and 19th century mindset. These are all obsolete. Future is so unpredictable, so unimaginable. What we need is openness, an open mind, an open heart, an open body, so that we can open to the future and let the future build itself. For that, we have to give ourselves. That's a way to find the true career that is in alignment with the emerging future. And the more we give ourselves, the more we follow the deepest truth of our heart, then our individual truth gets aligned with the collective truth, with the individual will, with the divine will, aligned with the evolutionary purpose of the society. Through that, tremendous freedom comes, because it is not you who are doing it, it is being done through you. And in fact, from that perspective, the more you enter the path of grace, and when you look back, you realize that what appeared as career by chance and career by choice, in fact, it was my own ignorance. This greater grace was already preparing and pushing through chance incidents, encounters, towards a purpose for which I was born. Each one of us have come with a purpose. Our soul has taken birth. There is a destiny. We are destined to do things. But destiny is like a seed that falls on a soil. The soil is like the fate. And if the soil is good, you will sprout easily. If the soil is difficult one, there will be struggle. But eventually it will open up. That's the work that is given to that seed to make a difference in any given context. There is a social transformation that can happen through us. That is already preconceived in the birth itself. The soul knows it. So the more we offer ourselves to that inmost calling, the more the path of grace opens, and we enter path of grace, which is more and more of flowing freedom, creativity, and ananda of being. Then it is no more about what am I doing. It is about the state of being that is unfolding. And it is not my work, it is the divine's work. I'm only an instrument, an instrumental condition. Nimitta matrena. So that's a kind of freedom towards which we can enter. And who knows, even entirely new career might open up that never existed in the past. Because the future is so unimaginably different. So let's leave behind the past and face the future squarely with a mind that is open, a heart that is bold, free, and a body that is ready for action. And it is in action, knowledge will be given. So act. So that's my sharing. Now, I would really like to hear from you, your questions, and build on it.
a question.
Yeah.
Hi, Manoj. So my question is like, in what ways can I, make my mind more silent and, understand my body better to see that what is inspiring me more? What are some of, are there any ways in which I can build up my lifestyle to understand myself more better?
Yeah. First of all, body needs work, physical work. And when we are doing small things at home, whether it is arranging our cupboard or whatever little things, cooking or cleaning the room or whatever it is, when we are totally present in that act, and that very act itself is an offering, fully present. Imagine that very act of brooming your room is your career path, because it's a practice, opening you to the harmony and flow through the body. The way you hold a broom, the way you sweep, it has a rhythm, it has a flow. And can you be fully present there? Can you enjoy that little act? Can you come alive in your body? The moment you connect with your senses, with your body, your mind naturally falls silent. It is the mental noise that blocks our possibilities. But when we come into action through the body, doing small things in every little thing, as mother says, remember and offer. Through that simple, small acts, material acts, there is a way of knowing through the body. Body is the most sophisticated instrument in the universe. It is the most delicate, most complex instrument capable of tremendously expanding to a great consciousness. So this body, Shariram Kalu Dharma Sadhanam, this body is the thing to be known. It has its wisdom, tremendous wisdom. So connect to the body through little works, offer everything, create little beauty everywhere possible. And truth in the body will speak itself. Because the language the mind speaks is full of words, whereas the body is heaviness or lightness, or body wants to dance. When there is pain, that's the language of the body. So listen to the body. And the more silence you have, the more you are able to listen deepest depth of your heart. And through that, you will know the truth of the moment, what to do on any given moment, because you are given the guidance moment to moment. Mind is always pre-planning things, whereas this truth that is alive at this moment, it is to be listened to and followed and surrendered to. Bring the mind and the body together. Then the emotions will open up. Only when the emotions flow, then the channel is open. Then the body becomes a flowing pathway. So you receive and transmit through the body. Just like a grand dancer who improvises moment to moment, but after tremendous training of the body.
Thank you, sir. I have a question. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. My question is, how do you deal with the fear of the future?
Yeah, fear, there are all types of fear. One of the fundamental framework to approach any problem is, if you want to deal with the darkness, you don't fight with the darkness, you bring light. The same way, if you want to deal with fear, you don't fight with fear, you bring in courage. So look at people who are doing courageous acts to get inspiration, and see what is it that you can do, the small steps of courage to break out of your confines. Then there is fear in the mind, there is fear in the heart, there is fear in the body. Start with small things. We had one student, she had this fear of people laughing at her, judging her. So she did an experiment. She decided to do some weird things on the pathway where people were walking. So she put some mats, some paper, colors, and she started painting with her feet, walking around there, dancing there without speaking anything to anybody. Now that was a little crazy thing to do when people are walking along the pathway. And it was her way of confronting the fear of being judged and laughed at by people. So design your own practice, identify your fear, and bring in courage. What is one act that you can do in order to break out of that fear? Bring in courage. That is a simple solution to fear problem.
Hello, sir. I would like to ask a question. It's similar to what Ria addressed. Actually, it's a little difficult for me to understand what exactly inspires me. And so you said that we need to bring our minds. What inspires me? Like there are a lot of things that I like to do, and there are a lot of small things where I feel alive, where I feel that I'm really involved. But then again, if I have to pinpoint, okay, this is what inspires me, I am not able to do that. You said that we need to bring our mind and body in conjunction. So how do I do that? Like in my day-to-day practice, is it that I need to do more of these activities?
To use a metaphor, in Vedic Yajna, the fire is kindled by something called irony, that is by creating friction. One is a fixed body and the other is a moving body. You turn it. Through that, the fire is lit. In psychological process, first is to find where the wall is. Now, to discover the wall, just observe. You might find that this is something that is interesting and I want to do it, and you go ahead, try to do this. And as you go on the way, you hit a wall. In the sense, things are not progressing. Initial enthusiasm fades out, and then the going gets tough. It gets boring, and then internal resistance shows up. No, this is probably not the right thing. Maybe I'm not doing the right thing. And then another one shows up saying, hey, this is more interesting. So then you start walking the other path. And the process repeats. You again come across a point where that runs out of steam. And you lose interest. And you find it tiring to go on with it. Meanwhile, something else shows up. So what is happening is, imagine there is a circular wall around you. You can't see it. And you try walking on one direction and you hit the wall. That is the internal resistance. Then you backtrack and go in another direction. You hit the same wall in another direction. We have a comfort zone and around which there is a wall in which we safely live. The magic happens outside the wall. So the moment you hit the wall, that the moment you discover an internal resistance, it's a golden opportunity to break through. That's where the friction can come in. That's where the will is built. That is where the perseverance is required. Unfortunately, again, our education system only develops the thinking part of the mind, not the will part of the mind. Knowledge is one of the faculty, but the doing capacity is the will. Will is not developed. Will develops only when it is lifting weight. That means when it confronts a challenge and go ahead and do it. In the process of doing, the muscle builds. So when you confront the resistance, persevere. Internal resistance is the key to build your muscle of the will. If you backtrack, then you are back to the comfort zone. but there is a great joy in that effort required to cut through the wall. And once you break out, you expand the scope. And the more you build your will, the more you will be able to expand faster and faster and learn faster and faster. Otherwise, you will be trapped within a confinement of habitual zone. It's a boundary created by old habits, mental habit, emotional habit, physical habit. So look for internal resistance. That's the wall where the friction is, and that's where you kindle the fire. Don't give up there.
So I have a question regarding our own swabhav. We always keep talking about that there is an innate nature which everyone is born with. And I think this is in line to the previous question where how to find your swabhav, which leads to the correct course of your action, which leads to the proper dharma, whether it's corporate dharma, whether it's something else, that it leads to your innate nature, your passion that really comes out. So as I think the previous question was, sometimes you don't figure out how many things are already happening in your life. So how does that swabhav really comes into picture? How does one find that real swabhav?
Yeah, here again, there is the notion of Swadharma and Swabhava in Indian tradition, that the soul is born with a purpose and certain nature. And then its action in the world translates into, when it translated through our instruments, there are people who are, say, naturally good at, say, knowledge, ability to work with knowledge. Just like there are people who can work with a brick and land, and like they are good with, say, green thumb. They can do some good gardening, material substance. Imagine everyone has a particular substance to work with that you are at home with. Let's purely take material substance. There is somebody who is very comfortable with wood, very good with making things with wood. Somebody is good with granite. Somebody is good with, say, jewelry. This is all materials, physical material. Natural capacity to deal with certain kind of material things. Then there are subtle materials, people who are good with money. It is not a material, physical material, but it's another subtler form of movement energy that you can mold, and people can channelize that energy who are very much at home with it. Then there are people who are comfortable with pure power, strong will to move people and things. And then there are people who are comfortable with even subtler material like thought, ideas. They live in the world of ideas. For them, every thought, every idea is almost like a brick they work with. So there is a whole gradation of materials, from most concrete to extremely subtle and spiritual. So each person will have a natural inclination towards a particular type of material domain. Whether it is, I can work with subtle things, or I can work with more concrete things where I feel more at home. In ancient India, this was referred to as those who work with this thought and idea, the world of knowledge. The Brahma knowers were known as Brahmins. And those who work with the power aspect is Kshatriyas. And those who work with money and wealth generation and harmonizing it, Vaishya. And those who work with material things as Shudra. But because that knowledge has degenerated into such a gross form, we lost its original psychological Swadharma Swabhava component of it. Each one has an inclination towards certain type. So first is to know that where am I at home? Out of these 4 types. So this Sri Aurobindo classifies as wisdom, strength, harmony, and perfection. What type am I? What is my soul force? So that's a whole domain. That's an ancient Indian knowledge system that gives the fundamental soul type from where comes our Swadharma and Swabhava. Whichever be the material that you are comfortable with, all four are required for the fullness of it. It's a large field in itself. It requires self-observation, swadhyaya, to understand oneself. Where am I at home with? Where do I come alive naturally? So look back at your projects where you have naturally felt at home, where you enjoyed, you excelled spontaneously without having to learn it the hard way. There are things that comes to you very naturally. So just observe backward, look at the projects that you have done and see what is the domain in which it is falling, where you are naturally gifted. And we need to look at independent of the domain of action in terms of fundamental skills that you're bringing in, fundamental qualities that you bring in.
Thank you very much.
So that way we can find what is sense to me. Yeah.
So does it mean that it has to be a self-directed learning, the learning that is giving me the direction to walk, the open schooling that is talked of these days?
Yes, self-directed learning. Exactly. That self-driven, self-directed, self-aware. It has to come from the self. And this is again going back to the ancient foundation of our education. It is by coming in touch with that deepest truth within us, which is like a radiant sun. From there, that self-born force awakens. And that force compels and propels. That is where the will to progress comes. And that is what makes us curious. So following the trails of curiosity or inspiration opens that door. And that is where we discover the self-born force that is not because of any external cause, but it is your very nature. You discover your radiant force and it radiates through you just like a rose will have its fragrance. It's your truth. It's your nature. It will radiate and it will flow through. What you need to do is instruments are to be purified and perfected so that it can radiate and flow through. The most amazing thing is it is through surrendering to that radiance, your creativity, your expansion, your growth happens.
So we have 7 more questions from the participants.
Yeah, I'm not checking the chat box.
Yeah, I will. I'll just read it out to you. One common question is, how can you silence your mind from unwanted thoughts or things and focus it towards the right path? How do you stop yourself from procrastinating and not being complacent?
Yeah, these are 2 different questions. So one is the silencing of the mind. So when we have high degree of concentration, mind naturally falls silent. Concentration and silence go together. Usually our mind is scattered. So that requires training so that the mind becomes single focused. Through that, it can enter into whatever it wants to know. In that process, silence naturally comes. Then there is a higher form of silence. That is when you listen to the silence itself. Say there are sounds. In any soundscape, between sounds, there are silence, gaps. When you listen to that silence, behind all the sounds, you enter the zone of silence, regardless of the sounds that are happening on the surface. And that's where you begin to hear what is known as the anahata, the unstruck sound, the sound of silence. And you enter and identify with it. That's second way. Third is more yogic, is to open upward, there is a zone of silence above. We can, I just briefly touch upon it. Let's say there is a zone of silence above we can open to, and that come inside. And as a result, silence settles in the mind, in the nerves, even in the body. A deep silence come into the picture. So that is a higher force entering. Higher consciousness always bring with it silence, peace, certain density known as chit ghana, the consciousness density. It is something that brings certain stillness and peace and calm, steadiness as you open to it. But that's a very advanced stage. Step number 1 is concentration. Gather all the scattered threads of mind so that we are able to hold it. And that is the first level. So I would say focus on that. Then the other one, this procrastination. This is a collaboration between the body consciousness and the mind and its ability to reason out. We have different parts. Body has its own consciousness, which is different from the mind and its consciousness. So if the body doesn't want to get up in the morning, it will use the mind to come up with a story that you need not get up now, or if you want to postpone something, it has to get the consent from the mind. So first is to understand different parts of the being, and the body in particular is the seat of tamas, and its very nature is very dull. That's why when we enter into sleep, we are actually entering into the body consciousness, and the morning when we get up, the torpor, the lethargy, we are coming out of the body consciousness, and then slowly we yawn and get into the mental consciousness. Then mind is awake and we get into action. These are two different parts of the being. So the mind may be deciding beforehand that I want to do this. Then it goes to sleep and it's coming back wrapped up in the physical body consciousness, and body says, no, not now. So once you begin to understand the mind, the body, and there are other parts. So this is where self-awareness becomes necessary and development of the will become necessary. The work become more and more necessary to remove tamas from the body. Small little actions, setting small targets so that you accomplish it in action. So I repeat again and again and again, action, 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 action. That is where the transformation is. Oh, my light is gone. There is power failure here. So action is the key to actually transform the tamas. So the ancient mantra comes back, tamasoma jyotirgamaya. So I have tamas here, but I'm not giving up. I'm still speaking. We still have, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
So body consciousness has to be transformed. So in the ashram, you can see that mother has given so much importance to physical education, transformation of the body consciousness. And when the body is transformed, it becomes one of our best friends, the most sensitive, most delicate, most reliable instrument to know the truth. It receives truth. Similarly, our emotions get fluctuated very fast, whereas the body is so passive. If it can open to truth much more easily, simply, directly, and truth can act through the body. So preparation of the body is the key to get out of the procrastination that actually is born out of the body consciousness, but justified by the mind. And the more you are able to connect with the body, the more mind also will fall silent. And when the mind, your emotions, and the body, everything is yoked, then you're in a state of yoga that gets connected with the soul, and then everything flows. Your software, your power supply, your hardware, everything is made for each other. It flows together, works together, so that inner light can shine through.
So can we move on to the next question, Bhaiya?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question is, when we look around, we find most of the people in the jobs which they don't like. But to earn a living, we keep going. Sometimes due to pressure of consistent money flow that is needed to run the family or fear of taking the risk and failing. How does one operate to take new chance that is inspired to do?
Hello.
Were you able to hear me, Bhaiya?
It was broken in between. I couldn't fully hear. I understood that like you are caught up in situations where you're kind of forced to work for money.
Yes.
That's the situation.
And how do we find inspiration in such a situation?
One thing is to really look at, like, when we wake up from sleep, from being unconscious, from living career by chance to career by choice, when we are in that junction, when we wake up, to also recognize the fact that things are as they are for the good of your own evolutionary journey. Because you're born into a context, you're placed in a context that is necessary for your transformation. So if you look at the weight that is on you, the karmic bondages that are around, the financial pressures, or whatever be the pressures that are around, if you look at it as a conditions that are given to you to work through, to build you, just like clay is needed and shaped and made pliable, and then a pot is made and then put into the fire. There is a whole process of making a fantastic pot. The same way, when we wake up, our consciousness is not sufficiently formed. It is part of a collective unconscious. Individualization has not happened. We are part of a collective clay. Out of that, the divine is taking out a little bit of peace, and that's when we become aware of, oh, I'm caught up in this situation. I want to really get out. I can't even breathe. And how do I find inspiration in this context? But to know that something has awakened in you, that's a sign that you are now ready for the path. You cannot go back. It's a one-way ticket. It may take time, but the moment you see that time has come, now whatever I do, can I bring perfection into the moment? Say, I'm sitting right now. Can I sit in a way that is harmonious, steady, stable, or slouch, tamasic? Perfection in every moment, in whatsoever we do. That's where transformation is. It doesn't matter what context it is. We are talking to somebody. Can I bring in my utmost truth into that moment? Can my speech be truthful, harmonious, beautiful? I'm cooking, I'm brooming, I'm walking, I'm driving a car. It doesn't matter what. Can I bring in consciousness into it? Can I bring in harmony into it? Can I bring in truth and beauty into it? These are vessels given to us to fill with our consciousness. The more we fill it up, eventually the context will undergo transformation. You will find yourself liberated, new doors opening up, no matter what context it is. Whatever be the context, that is the forces that are placed on you for your own transformation. And if you look at it with that spirit and start transforming it moment by moment, it will undergo transformation. It's like drop by drop, drops of light in everything we do.
Beautiful answer. The next question: how can we use intuition as a tool for our growth and progress in daily life? How do we distinguish it with our thinking? Were you able to hear me, Bhaiya?
How to use intuition for our growth and our daily progress. That's the
Right.
question, right?
Yeah. And how do we distinguish with our thinking?
Yeah, the intuition, there are different levels of intuition. There is pre-rational stage of intuition and there are post-rational stage of intuition. Say the intuition in the heart, there is, say, this is a very common experience. Like we know certain things are meant to happen. This is going to be like this, but don't ask me how. But I know this will happen. This is what it is. Where we do not have the mind doesn't have the knowledge, but something in us that knows. Often we refer to that as gut feeling, which is to be distinguished from attachment, which is an emotional form of preferences. Whereas that intuition is, there is certain foreknowledge that comes to us. Something in us knows. So that the more we are able to listen to that sensing, and here again, it's like a child learning to walk. Many of our decisions will be wrong, but we need to keep practicing, And the more silence we have, the more we are able to discern that signal from the noise. And this is where again, the preparation of the body, silencing of the mind, calming of the nerves, all that become very important so that the signal that is coming as intuition in the heart become more and more clear. And the more we listen to the heart, even when we utter a word that is inappropriate, immediately you can sense a response in the heart saying, no, that is not okay. That's how you get to know the truth that is deep within you. So the more you listen inward, the more you know its language. And this part is never loud, never insistent. It's like our rational intelligence, intelligent will is caught between two sides. On one side is the silent truth of the soul that suggests silently. On the other side, we have our being of desire, being of laziness. These are all very noisy, very demanding characters, full of drama. Our emotional being is all the time into drama, drama, drama. It wants this and it wants then and there. So is the sensual being. So is the physical being. They are all demanding attention, craving attention, pushing and pulling. So the rational intelligence is caught between these two. And if the rational intelligence is able to see through the drama and align itself with that silent inner guide, that gentle gesture, and it is through that intuition grows. And that can be used in everyday activities. Just pause before doing anything. Just listen. Is this the right thing? What am I supposed to do? As if, imagine there is a wise guide within you. Begin your conversation with that guide. Listen to that guide. Take permission from that guide. Ask. First is to ask, what should I do? And wait for the answer. Don't force the answer to come. Don't imagine the answer to come. But first is to have a question that is real. Then you begin to get the answers. That's how you open to the intuition that emerges from the deep depth of your heart. Then slowly it will expand and envelop your whole body so that whenever you do a wrong step, you can know it in your body because the body is saying, hey, that's not the right thing. Even a wrong thought, a wrong speech. the body will immediately indicate, because deep in the heart, that is giving very clear signal. And through that, we can enter intuition, and decision making become increasingly spontaneous. And in fact, that is the pathway to career by grace. That opens the door to the career by grace. So this is where the purified rational intelligence and intelligent will surrenders itself to that intuition in the heart and transforms the emotional being and its drama, transforms the sensual being and its cravings, transforms the physical being and its laziness and lethargy.
Yes, thank you so much. The next question is, if one's purpose isn't arising from a space of community that is serving others, but from a space of self-serving only, can that be considered as a result of ego and not a true purpose? So in another way, does true purpose always be about serving and not exclusive?
The ego is always centered around itself. I am the doer. Even if it is serving others, it is glorifying itself. See, I am such an amazing servant, serving the poor people and serving the world, and such a hero I am. It is the ego. So the servant mode is not going to save you from the ego. Ego very nicely and very easily accommodates itself into this great servant of the world. That's the nature of the ego. Whether it is for me, my emotional satisfaction, ego satisfaction, or to amass wealth for myself, or to get fame for myself, whatever it is the ego seeks. It is all about me doing good things to others or to me, myself. Transcending this requires you forget about yourself. You are not there in the picture. Actually, it is happening to everyone when we are, say, absorbed in a work, something that is fascinating. You're reading a fascinating book. You are not there in the story. You are the story. You're identified totally with what you're reading. When you're playing a fascinating game, you're totally absorbed in it. You're not there in the story. It is when you are looking at what you're doing as a separate little thing, that little ego, self-conscious ego that is holding you back, that ego hardens, self-consciousness hardens. But there is a stage of development of the ego itself. From being part of an unconscious identification with the collective, you separate and become an ego, individualized ego. And then this ego has to be surrendered to something vaster. So that dissolve, and you are not there in the story. It is that which is beyond you that is acting through you. You are only a context. In fact, it's not just you, it's the whole thing, the whole world through which that is acting. And you begins to see the glory of the wisdom that is acting through all, that one divine power that is acting through all. And you admire and adore and worship that. You are not there in the story. Ego can also accommodate itself into poor me. Look, so humble little poor me, not harming anybody. It can accommodate into all kinds of stories. It's not just a form of aggression and selfishness. It's one of the most amazing characters in our story. You can take next question if there is.
Yes. So it is, we've almost crossed 9:15. So I will be sending everybody the feedback link. I request all the participants to please fill in the feedback link. And if you are in hurry, you can leave the session, and always you will be sent the recording of the session as well, and it will be put up on FB as well. So, and we will continue with other questions. So whoever wants to stay can stay. And if you are engaged with another work, then you can leave. So the next question is how to address passion. Is there any relation between passion and purpose?
Yes, passion comes with purpose. If there is no purpose, you can only have some momentary high, some spike of nervous excitement, which you may call passion. The moment you have an inspiring purpose ahead of you, something that is really challenging and exciting, with it comes passion, naturally. So these two are connected, but often we confuse our nervous excitement for passion. That is not passion. It's a momentary excitement. Passion is something that is calm, steady, and directed towards a purpose. Untiring.
Thank you, Manu sir. I just want to add something into it. I just asked this question. So we feel like we have to do this. I love these things. I love to do that thing. But the core education we take something different. Like for example, I've been into I studied engineering, and my work was like into social development and event management, and I was pursuing something else. So when it comes to thinking, we get into some kind of pressure, like what we have to do. So we choose a path, go with the flow, and sometimes this go with the flow can lead us something bad. Then we have to realize, okay, we should not go with the flow. We should come to one point where we have to make our own path apart from the go with the flow. So can you tell us like how to control those indriya where we think like I have to do this, that, and go with the flow?
I can't hear now.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. Did you heard my question, sir?
Harsh.
Yes, sir.
It's breaking. What I understood is you're asking about this false flow state,
Right,
where
sir.
we end up in doing wrong things, thinking that I'm doing the right thing. I'm flowing, going with the flow, and that confusion.
Right. Right, sir.
Yeah, this is a very, very important question and important issue, particularly alternate education, where we value the self-directed learning, self-driven learning, but without a clue to what we mean by self. Because we are composed of so many different parts, so many impulses, desires, and parts of being that are pulling in so many different directions. Which one is to follow? And in the name of being in the flow, which is unfortunately glorified heavily in many of the modern New Age spirituality, our impulses and getting carried away with desires and these movements, likings and disliking, is called being in the flow. And that won't work. True flow state can be arrived at only when all the instrumental layers, our mind is trained, our emotional being is trained, our nervous being is trained, our physical being is trained. So they all work together under the guidance of that inner guide, which is the true self, which is actually beginning to flow through. And flow happens only when this integration happens. But there are moments when by chance this fall in place for a moment and we feel high. But we can't stay there. We fall back because our instruments are not sufficiently trained to work together in coherence. So one of them will pull one way or other and everything will fall apart. So one key thing in this is to discern the self from the instruments of the self, then to train the instruments to listen to the self, and to organize the instruments and transform the instruments so that they always listen and surrender to the self that wants to flow through them, and not to confuse our emotional being for the soul. And this is a major confusion. The part that has this liking and disliking, that part that feels the pain and sorrow, that is not the self. That is our emotional being that is confused for the self. There is a lot of bad press about the mind and get into the heart. Here again, we confuse the emotional being for the soul, which is not. Soul doesn't have the drama of the emotional being. Emotional being loves all the pain and tears and drama, which has to be dealt with. It has to be made open, released from its pain, healed of the wounds, and so that it can open up to the greater flow of universal emotions, finer love, and connect to the deeper love that is universal. So without that systematic training of the instruments aligned with the self, we cannot really have a self-directed learning. It will only create confusion in the process. Or it will take a long time to figure things out because we are stumbling our way through. It is not necessary. So each instrumental nature has its own characteristic behavioral pattern. It has to be understood so that when they are speaking in certain language, we know that, okay, I understand this is, and I'm not following this. So that you listen to the true self and its inner guidance. That discernment, outer being and the inmost being, is crucial for self-directed learning. Otherwise, the flow state will be missed, or in the name of flow state, we end up creating a lot of mess for ourselves and others, and a long journey. We can cut short that.
Can we have Ravi ask the next question? Ravi, are you there? Okay, I think he is not available. Fine. Pragya, are you available?
Yes, I'm available.
Yeah, Pragya, sorry. Yeah, you can ask.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful and insightful session, sir. Thank you so much for that. My question is, being a school counselor, I come across, so many cases where kids, like adolescents, they are really passionate, especially of today's generation. What you talked about, trying to find their own inner calling, or not really their calling, so at least their areas of interest, identifying with those interests, and they have this intention of dwelling deeper into it and trying to discover more about themselves through it. But most often parents are not so much aligned with this idea, especially outside of Pondicherry. If we say people with who don't have such understanding of integral education, most of the schools. So the problem I would like to share with you is, so many students which are in my touch, they want to do something which is totally not in accordance with what their parents approve of. But since in our culture, children are still financially dependent on the parents, they are going to pay the fees, and emotionally also some up to some level they are brought up in certain ways and emotionally manipulated, as if they have to bear, they have to give back something in return of the upbringing of their parents. So that creates a lot of emotional tussle as well as financial dependence. How to cope with it, where children want to do what they want to do but parents are not ready to open up.
Yeah, it's a struggle for many, and there is no easy solution to it other than, say, if we are in a space where working with youngsters, if we can create context where their fields of interest, however small a scale in which it is to be experimented upon and worked upon, customize the practices to their context. That's the domain we need to look at. What is possible within that context, and if possible, parental level education, which is harder to have conversations with parents about the topic. But it is important, if possible, if parents are open to have a conversation and to create a little space for that, their uniqueness to come out. Because integral education is not really possible if the parents are not involved. If they have other agenda, we need to get them involved, which demands more coordination for the faculty members to see the whole system. In fact, whenever you work with young people, eventually you see that issues coming from the family is affecting them so much. Not only family, but also their relationships and the whole emotional being that is caught up in the situations. And also growing up in our society where a lot of abuses, physical abuses and all that happens, and they carry all that pain. So there is a whole lot of work that is required in that domain, where there are many things that needs healing, and that requires a space where these are addressed. We need to create that safe space where these are brought out, and children can express it, share it. They have a safe space to express, bring this out. And if possible, if parents get involved, even better. But that healing and that deeper dimension needs to be addressed. Otherwise, it will be there always behind the seal, disrupting whatever you do. Often you will find that parents themselves are having challenges. That's getting translated into children and their life. Not an easy situation to deal with, but first is acknowledging this exists and creating spaces to address it.
So the next question is by Shravya. To be able to work as per our nature, often there are other skills that we have to pick up in order to make the work meaningful to the world. How should we view this aspect?
These two, that inner and outer, initially it is experienced as two separate things. Outer world is really separate from my inner world, my needs, my skill set. But these two actually grow together the deeper we look at. Whatever skill we want to develop, it is in interaction with the world that is so-called outside. In the process, it actually gets refined and developed through feedback loop with the world around. There's a continuous exchange of energy. Through that, there is pouring in of possibilities. So one thing to drop from our consciousness is the separation between inner and outer. And to look at the context as not something separate from me. I am one with that context. And context creates certain possibilities. What is it that I can use? It's like if you are in a place of rocks, you make house with rocks. If you are in a place of clay, you make house with clay. You still make house. So in whatever be the context that is offering, accordingly, your skill set will unfold. The inner being knows how to mold what is available to its context. So there is a dependency of these two, inner and outer, flowing in and out, in and out, in and out. So don't think in terms of skills that are isolated from the context. And this isolation itself is what is actually alienates us from the living context. That's the reason why in India, education, more than 80% of engineers are unemployable, because they are out of context. They are living in academic spaces that have nothing to do with the living reality of India or the industry where they are supposed to serve. So the learning, skill and knowledge development has to be integrated into the context. It has to be context driven. As Sri Aurobindo writes, near to far. That is one of the fundamental educational principles. Whatever is near, immediate, and contextual to that soul's evolution, it is the material out of which it can be molded. So the skills will unfold out of it, knowledge will unfold out of it. Otherwise, it will be out of context, dissociated. So look at the context and see what does this context require, and whatever be the little skill I have, how can I build on it to engage in a live manner with the life that is around. Through that, I will be transformed, the context will be transformed. I will develop necessary skills, necessary knowledge, necessary competency.
Wonderful. So the next question is, I understand that it's the skills that we develop, not the domain, which will make us successful in our careers. But we do have to choose a domain to have a career. So how to choose a domain when you're equally inspired towards all domains available to you?
Yeah, especially these days with people with a large number of skill sets are emerging, and geniuses are like that. They have always skills and knowledge in multiple fields. In fact, deeper you go into any field, you will find fundamentals are the same. Foundational knowledge, foundational skills are the same. That's why things like communication skill. How do you communicate to a group of people? It's one of the very fundamental skills to have, regardless of the domain, because you are meant to work in teams. How do you work in team? So after communication comes collaboration. How do you collaborate? Do you have the skill set to collaborate? Learning to collaborate, learning to put aside the ego and learn to identify with a larger group. Communication, collaboration, these are fundamental skills, domain independent. So it doesn't matter which domain you go for. Now, if you have multiple skills, you may start with one domain, but soon you will start adding to it. The richness of that domain get enriched by multiple talents that you have. And these days, people are combining diverse skill sets into new compositions. In the old world, these things were separate things. In today's world, people are combining extremely diverse skill set into a new pathway, which has never been there. So no need to give up anything, but start somewhere. Whatever is nearest, accessible, doable. In that doing is where you connect with the life energy, and it start living, it start spinning energy, it start moving things, into which you can add more, and it becomes increasingly complex and bring you can everything that you know into it. But start somewhere that is nearest and easiest and doable. The problem is often people don't start because I love so many things and I have the fear of missing out. So I don't start at all. So drop that fear and start where you are, what is immediately accessible, doable, and then add to it one by one. Nothing will be lost. Everything will come and reveal in that context.
Yes. So some of the questions on ego and negative impulses, negative thoughts, I think they have been answered already. So we are skipping those questions. Another question, how does one release or heal from emotional being without getting mixed with it?
Yeah, it's a big field in itself, the healing of the heart. Heart need trusted spaces to open up. This is where the relationship becomes so fundamental. If you're a facilitator and if you have students, to build that relationship, and this cannot be artificially created. This can happen only when our own heart is deeply open. And when you're coming from that empathic space, you can tune with the other. You are holding the other in you, and you know the other in you. You know the pain of the other in you. And through that, there is a bond that happens. There's a chemistry that happens. There's a transformation that happens. When it comes to heart, it's the love that heals. And we are all wounded by love, first experience of love. When that wounds happen, the heart closes. Then we don't open up. But as facilitators, as we begin to expand and widen ourselves, and if we are able to enter into increasingly wider, more universal love, in that container, those who need healing naturally opens up. So the first condition is our own healing and transformation as facilitators. If we ourselves are wounded, if we ourselves are not healed, stuck emotionally, there is nothing much we can do. So we need to first heal ourselves by opening, having trusted spaces, having soul connection, having that community where we can be what we are without having to pretend anything, with our whole being. So it's so crucially important to have a community, a group of people where you are authentic with all your vulnerabilities. When you have that space for sharing, then you have a space to heal. And from there, the journey can deepen because each one is adding to that journey. And yeah, there is no shortcut to true love. It has to really emanate from the heart. And it naturally comes the more we are connected with our soul. And from there, when we encompass. And it is also very important as facilitators to really be centered, because it may be very tempting to help people who are in need. But if you are not grounded, when someone opens up, or when you develop more empathic capacities, imagine someone who is in depression, that whole depression come to you and you experience that depression as you are depressed. If you don't have that inner ground, if you don't have that inner freedom, inner vastness to receive and transform or to dissolve whatever is entering, because the moment heart and heart connects, there is a fusion of energies, emotions, the vital exchange that takes place. So one must be vast enough, stable enough to hold a space for healing to occur. And when you have that wideness and vastness, and this is where the sadhana becomes so important for the facilitators to really widen yourself, be calm and stable, so that without having to do anything, naturally healing begins to happen because of the nature of the field that you carry, because of the energy field that you hold, that you are. That's the greatest gift we can give, our own healed, loving energy. And in that presence, gently things open up, gently things get dissolved, without necessarily going through any analytical, which in fact, analytical processes are more harmful and more destructive than actually the silent holding of love. So to first work on ourselves so that we can hold. Really, a big mother's heart is required to hold wounded children. So many of them are wounded. There's so much pain, so much suffering. So we really need to work on ourselves to hold the space, to create containers, safe spaces where expression can happen, release can happen, healing can happen.
Okay, so due to the lack of time, I think some of the questions we are not able to take. However, I think all the participants, whoever still have questions in your mind, you can put up in the suggestions while you're filling your feedback form so that we can take it up and we will get back to you with the answers through mail. Okay, and with the last question, I think Ravi, if you're there, you can go ahead with it and we will end the session after this. Ravi, are you there?
Sure. Yep. Hi.
Yes.
Thank you, Manojda, for this wonderful session. I just have a quick question. This is regarding one of my friends. So, most of the time that I have seen actually in people around me is that they know that they are stuck in some place. They know what they need to do, yet they are not able to do it by constantly demoralizing themselves by saying that people won't understand them or not support them, and they find out ways not to do things and end up procrastinating. And I am not able to help these people, like, because I'm not able to get them to do action. Can you please help me in certain way, uh, something that can help me understand what or how may I help them?
First of all, the idea of helping, we need to drop that.
Okay.
That we need to help ourselves first. One is to really see that we are complex beings made of many parts. So even if you see that somebody, a part of them knows and admits that they have to change, they are stuck, but still another part is justifying and holding on to, which is very, very common. Since we are made of many parts, some parts are ready, other parts are not ready. So since that readiness is not there, it looks like they are stuck. It's just that they are not ready for that change. Often people need to reach a point of deep suffocation to break through. And if someone is not ready and if you try to help, it only be counterproductive. It's just like only when the mango is ripe, it will fall. The same way, everything has its time. When somebody is ready, they will drop their problem and come out. Often problems are the means to avoid taking responsibilities. Having a little disease or having a little problem and glorifying that problem, telling everybody, I'm having this problem, I am so stuck, but doing nothing about getting out of it. And it's very, very common. they use that as a strategy to often avoid responsibility, taking responsibility in various contexts, and to play the victim. These are common drama forms. When somebody is ready, they will really get out. They will really seek for help if they need help. Proactively trying to help somebody, better avoid.
Yep.
If someone comes to you, yes, there is some possibility.
Yeah.
Yep, that is actually really insightful.
Yeah, so I think we have come to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Manoj Da, for being with us. And I think it was a great, insightful session, very informative, and just right from your heart to, I think, all the questions, though some are still not yet answered, I think they did find what they were looking for from the session. Yes, so it's time to end the session. So before we end the session, I'd like to also announce the next session that we are going to have on AuroYouth platform. So just, yes, so we will be having the next session on relationships, so which will be taken by Divyanshi too, which is going to be on next Sunday, 19th of July from 8 to 9:15 itself. So I request all the participants to be there for the next session as well. So thank you so much, everybody.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.